The emergency klaxon shrieked through the command center of Nexus Station, its piercing wail cutting through the usual hum of 1,000 different species going about their daily business. Ambassador Keth Tar, of the Vorthak Confederation, dropped his steaming cup of Jelka brew, the purple liquid splattering across his scaled hands as he spun toward the massive holographic display dominating the center of the room. "What in the void's name is happening?" he barked, his four eyes narrowing as dozens of technicians scrambled around their stations. Chief Scanner Operator Yixla, a slight being with gossamer wings that shimmered like oil on water, looked up from her console with an expression of pure terror. "Sir, we're picking up massive gravitational distortions at the edge of the Terran Nebula. Multiple contacts, hundreds of them." Keth Tar's blood ran cold. The Terran Nebula. That cursed empty stretch of space that every civilized species avoided. According to legend, it was the birthplace of the humans, those mythical warriors, whose stories parents told their children to keep them in line. "Impossible," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the alarms. "Humans are just stories, fairy tales to frighten younglings." But as the scanner readings cascaded across the display, showing ship after ship emerging from the nebula's depths, Keth Tar realized that some fairy tales might be about to become very, very real. Chapter 1. The Council of Fools 3. Days before the emergency at Nexus Station, the Grand Assembly of the Galactic Coalition met in their towering crystal spire on the capital world of Zentaris Prime. Representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered in the great circular chamber, their voices rising in heated debate about trade routes, territorial disputes, and mining rights. Ambassador Keth Tar sat in his designated section, trying not to roll his eyes as Chancellor Vexen of the crystalline hegemony droned on about taxation policies. The Vorthak had always prided themselves on being pragmatic. They dealt with facts, not fantasies, which made the current discussion particularly irritating. And furthermore, Vexen continued, his translucent form shifting colors as he spoke, "We simply cannot ignore the increasing reports from the Outer Rim territories. Ship disappearances, entire mining operations vanishing without a trace, and always the same witness accounts, if we can call them that." A ripple of nervous laughter echoed through the chamber. Senator Quarix of the Beetle Kingdoms clicked his mandibles dismissively. "Witness accounts of what exactly? Invisible ships? Beings who can survive in the vacuum of space? These are the fever dreams of frightened colonists, nothing more." "Perhaps," Vexen replied, his tone growing sharper. "But the missing ships are real enough. 17 merchant vessels in the past galactic year, all vanishing in the same region of space. The survivors all tell the same impossible story." "Which is?" prompted General Thondar of the Reptilian Alliance, her massive frame leaning forward with interest. Vexen's form flickered with what could only be described as embarrassment. "They claim to have encountered humans." The chamber erupted. Some delegates burst into laughter. Others hissed their displeasure at having their time wasted with children's stories. Keth Tar found himself shaking his head in disgust. Humans. Senator Quarix's laughter was particularly grating. "What's next, Chancellor? Reports of the Void Singers? The Ghost Fleet of Andromeda? Perhaps we should also prepare for an invasion of Dreamweavers." But not everyone was laughing. In the shadows of the upper galleries, a small figure in a hooded cloak watched the proceedings with growing alarm. Dr. Zara Okafor, xenoarchaeologist and the only human in a galaxy that didn't believe her species existed, felt her heart racing as she listened to the debate below. She had spent the last 5 years hiding among the various species of the Coalition, using advanced holographic disguises and careful genetic manipulation to appear as a member of the humanoid Altarian race. Her mission was simple: gather intelligence about the galaxy's major powers while her people prepared for the day they would finally reveal themselves. That day, she realized, might be coming sooner than anyone expected. As the debate raged below, Zara quietly activated her subspace communicator, a piece of technology so advanced that no Coalition species could detect it. The message she sent was brief, but urgent. Phoenix Command. This is Nightingale. Our presence is suspected. Recommend. Acceleration of Project Homecoming. The galaxy isn't ready, but we may not have a choice. The reply came within minutes, carried by quantum entanglement across impossible distances. Message received, Nightingale. Admiral Chen has been briefed. Prepare for possible extraction. And Zara, it's time to come home. Chapter 2. The Watchers in the dark, the Stormcrow drifted silently through the asteroid field, its hull scarred from 100 battles but still deadly as a coiled serpent. Captain Vash Torvin, a grizzled veteran of the Trader Wars, peered through the viewports at the massive mining platform ahead. Epsilon 7 was one of the Coalition's largest automated mining operations, extracting rare elements from the asteroid belt surrounding the dead star Kirax. Or at least it had been. Scanners show no life signs, reported his first officer, Mexri, her blue-tinged skin pale with worry. But the platform still powered, main reactors running at 50%. Torvin scratched his beard, a nervous habit he'd developed over 20 years of hauling cargo through some of the galaxy's most dangerous sectors. 50%? That platform needs at least 80% just to maintain life support for a full crew. Maybe they evacuated, suggested Mexri, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it herself. Without sending a distress signal? Without taking their personal effects? Torvin gestured toward the scanner readings. Look at this. Their shuttles are still in the bays, personal quarters still have life support. It's like they just vanished into thin air. The two traders exchanged worried glances. This was the 18th such incident in the past year. Installations, ships, even entire colonies found empty but otherwise undamaged. The Coalition authorities had various theories. Pirates using new technology, rogue AI systems, even some kind of plague that left no trace. But the survivors, the few who had actually witnessed these disappearances, told a different story. A story that most civilized beings dismissed as impossible. Captain, Mexri's voice was barely a whisper. What if the stories are true? What if it really is? Don't, Torvin cut her off sharply. Don't even say it. Humans are myths, Mexri. Stories to scare children and sell entertainment programs. They don't exist. As if the universe itself wanted to prove him wrong, their proximity alarm suddenly screamed to life. Contact! Mexri shouted, her fingers dancing over her console. Large vessel, coming in fast from the shadow of asteroid Kirax 7. Torvin spun toward the main display, expecting to see one of the Coalition's standard ship designs. Instead, his eyes widened in shock as something completely alien glided into view. The ship was sleek, almost organic in appearance, with curves and angles that seemed to flow like liquid metal. It was painted a deep matte black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making it difficult to focus on. Strange angular symbols glowed with soft blue light along its hull, and weapon ports that looked like nothing in any Coalition database were clearly visible. I've never seen a design like that, Mexri breathed. What species builds ships like that? Before Torvin could answer, their communications array crackled to life. The voice that emerged was impossible. It spoke in perfect galactic standard, but with an accent and rhythm unlike anything they'd ever heard. Stormcrow, this is the UES Phantom. Please state your business in this sector. Torvin's hands trembled as he reached for the comm controls. This is Captain Torvin of the independent trader, Stormcrow. We're investigating the abandoned mining platform. What are you? There was a pause, then something that might have been amusement in the alien voice. We are the species you've been blaming for all those mysterious disappearances, Captain. We are human. The comm channel went silent. Mexri stared at her captain, her mouth hanging open in shock. Torvin felt his world tilting on its axis. Humans. Real, actual humans. That's impossible, he whispered. Is it? The voice came back, tinged with something that sounded almost like sadness. Tell me, Captain, in all your travels, have you ever been to the Terran Nebula? Of course not. It's a dead zone full of radiation and gravitational anomalies. Nothing could survive there. Nothing could survive there, the human agreed. Unless it was designed to. Before Torvin could process what that meant, the Phantom began to fade from view, its strange hull technology rendering it nearly invisible against the star field. "Wait!" Torvin shouted into his comm. "Where are you going? What happened to the miners?" The human's voice came back one last time, distant and echoing as if from a great depth. "They're safe, Captain. Safer than they've ever been. As for where we're going home. And very soon, the entire galaxy is going to know we exist." The Phantom vanished completely, leaving only empty space and two very shaken traders staring at their scanner displays. "Mexri," Torvin said slowly, "get me a direct channel to Coalition Command. Emergency priority." "What should I tell them?" Torvin looked out at the void where the impossible ship had been. "Tell them the ferry." Tales just became real. The emergency session of the Grand Assembly was unlike anything in the Coalition's 1,000-year history. Representatives from every major species packed the great chamber, their voices rising in a cacophony of fear, disbelief, and barely controlled panic. The holographic displays surrounding the central podium showed scanner readings, ship manifests, and most damning of all, the recorded communication between Captain Torvin and the mysterious human vessel. Ambassador Keth Tar stood at his species podium, his four eyes scanning the chaos around him. In all his years of diplomatic service, he had never seen the Coalition in such disarray. Chancellor Vexen's crystalline form flickered with agitation as he called for order. "Distinguished colleagues, please. We must approach this situation with logic and reason." "Logic?" General Thondar's roar silenced the chamber. "What logic is there in ghost stories coming to life? If these humans truly exist, where have they been for the past millennium? Why are they revealing themselves now?" In the upper gallery, Dr. Zara Okafor watched the proceedings with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Her people had always known this day would come, but she had hoped it would be under better circumstances. The Coalition was fragmenting before her eyes, terror replacing the careful diplomacy that had kept 1,000 worlds at peace. Her communicator buzzed softly. "Another message from Phoenix Command. Nightingale, you are cleared for revelation. The Admiral wants the Coalition to understand what they're dealing with before the fleet arrives." Zara took a deep breath, reached up, and deactivated her holographic disguise. The change was subtle at first. Her skin shifted from the pale blue of the Altarians to a warm brown. Her eyes changed from silver to dark brown, and her height increased by several inches. But the most striking change was something indefinable. A presence, an aura of quiet strength that seemed to radiate from her like heat from a star. She stood and walked to the railing of the upper gallery. "Perhaps," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, "I can answer some of your questions." Every eye in the chamber turned toward her. A collective gasp rose as the delegates realized they were looking at something they had believed to be mythical. "My name is Dr. Zara Okafor," she continued, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "I am a xenoarchaeologist, a cultural observer, and yes, I am human." The chamber erupted in chaos. Some delegates scrambled for the exits, others shouted questions or accusations, and a few simply stared in stunned silence. Chancellor Vexen's form blazed with shock and outrage. "Impossible. Security scans, genetic markers. You've been among us for years. How did you hide?" Zara smiled, though there was no humor in it. "The same way we've been hiding in the Terran Nebula for the past 1,000 years. Through technology you can't detect and adaptations you wouldn't believe." General Thondar, recovering faster than most, stepped forward with her hand on her weapon. "If you're truly human, then you'll answer for the missing ships and colonies." "The missing colonists are safe," Zara replied calmly. "They're being held in comfortable facilities while we decide what to do with them. As for the ships, we needed to study your technology, understand your capabilities. We had to know what we were facing." "Facing?" Senator Quarix's mandibles clicked nervously. Are you declaring war on the Coalition?" Zara was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. That depends entirely on what happens in the next few hours. You see, my people have been watching the galaxy for a very long time. We've seen species rise and fall. We've watched civilizations grow and stagnate. And we've seen what happens when fear and prejudice take hold. She gestured toward the displays showing the Coalition's military formations. Right now, your fleets are mobilizing. Your generals are planning strikes. Against the Terran Nebula, you're preparing for war against an enemy you don't understand. Then help us understand. Chancellor Vexen's form pulsed with desperate hope. Tell us what your people want. We want what every species wants, Zara replied. To survive. To protect. Our children. To find our place in the galaxy. Her expression hardened. But we will not bow to species that consider us myths or monsters. We will not hide in the shadows while others decide our fate. A new voice cut through the tension, cold, mechanical, and utterly without emotion. Dr. Okafor. Zara turned, to see Admiral Krixta of the Coalition Defense Force standing in the main entrance, flanked by a full squad of heavily armed soldiers. The insectoid's compound eyes glittered with barely contained hostility. You are under arrest for espionage, infiltration, and conspiracy against the Coalition. Surrender immediately, or we will be forced to. The Admiral never finished her sentence. The lights in the chamber suddenly dimmed, and a new voice filled the air, calm, authoritative, and unmistakably human. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Systems Navy. All Coalition forces will stand down immediately. The holographic displays flickered and changed, showing not fleet positions or scanner readings, but a single image that made every being in the chamber freeze in terror. Ships, hundreds of them, thousands. They filled the display from edge to edge. A vast armada of sleek, deadly vessels unlike anything the Coalition had ever seen. And at their head, massive beyond belief, was a ship that could only be described as a mobile city, bristling with weapons, glowing with power, and moving through space with the inexorable certainty of a force of nature. "Oh, Void preserve us," whispered Chancellor Vexen. "How many ships do they have?" Admiral Chen's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. "Enough. The human fleet consists of 12,000 combat vessels and support ships, crewed by the descendants of the species you thought were myths. We have been preparing for this moment for 1,000 years. General Thondar's voice cracked with strain. What? What do you want? What we've always wanted, came the reply. Recognition, respect, and a place at the table when decisions about this galaxy are made. The age of hiding is over, General. Humanity has returned to the stars. As if to emphasize the point, the massive human dreadnought moved closer to Zentaris Prime, its shadow falling across the capital city like an eclipse. In the assembly chamber, representatives from 1,000 worlds stared up at the displays and realized that their galaxy had just become a very different place. Dr. Zara Okafor smiled for the first time in years. "Welcome to the new age," she said softly. "I hope you're ready for it." Chapter 4. The Price of Fear. The Coalition War Room. Deep beneath Zentaris Prime's surface had been designed to coordinate the defense of 1,000 worlds. Now, as fleet commanders and government officials gathered around the massive holographic display, it felt more like a tomb. Admiral Krixta's compound eyes darted between the tactical readouts, each one painting a grimmer picture than the last. "Report," she snapped at her aide, a nervous reptilian lieutenant who was clearly struggling to maintain his composure. "Ma'am, long-range scanners confirm the human fleet numbers. 12,000 vessels with their flagship. They're calling it the New Terra, measuring over 30 kilometers in length. Our largest dreadnoughts are barely 5 kilometers. Armament analysis? Unknown, ma'am. Their weapons don't match any technology in our databases. Energy signatures suggest power levels that should be impossible for ships of that size." General Thondar slammed her massive fist on the table. "Impossible or not, they're out there. What are our options?" Fleet Commander Zethik of the Aquatic Federation, his environmental suit hissing softly, leaned forward. "We could attempt a preemptive strike, Coordinate all coalition fleets for a simultaneous attack before they can what? Admiral Krixta cut him off. We have no idea what their defensive capabilities are. For all we know, attacking them could be suicide. So what do you suggest? Thondar demanded. That we surrender without a fight? I suggest we listen to what they have to say. The voice came from the chamber's entrance. Ambassador Kethtar stood there looking older than his considerable years. Behind him walked Dr. Zara Okafor, still flanked by guards, but no longer restrained. The human has agreed to serve as a liaison, Kethtar explained, ignoring the hostile stares from the military officers. Given our current situation, it seemed prudent to hear their terms. Admiral Krixta's mandibles clicked angrily. Terms? They're in no position to dictate terms, aren't we? Zara asked quietly. Admiral, how many ships does the coalition have in total? That's classified information. 8,347, Zara said without hesitation, plus approximately 2,000 support vessels and civilian craft that could be pressed into military service. You also have defensive installations around 463 major worlds, though only 87 of those could withstand a sustained assault. The silence in the room was deafening. Finally, Commander Zethic found his voice. How do you know all this? Zara smiled sadly. Because we've been watching you for 1,000 years. We know everything about your military capabilities, your industrial capacity, your political structures. We've had agents among you for decades, people you trusted, people you called friends. General Thondar's eyes narrowed dangerously. More spies like you? Some. Others were volunteers from your own species who believed in our cause. Did you know that Senator Quarix's chief of staff has been feeding us information for the past 5 years? Or that 3 of your most trusted tactical analysts are actually human sympathizers who've been subtly influencing your military planning? The accusations hit the assembled officers like physical blows. Admiral Krixta's voice was barely a whisper. Why? Why reveal yourselves now? Zara's expression grew somber. Because we're running out of time. There's something coming, Admiral. Something that threatens every species in this galaxy, human and coalition alike. We need to work together if we're going to survive. What kind of threat? Kethtar asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. Before Zara could respond, every display in the war room suddenly shifted to show a new image. The human fleet was still there, but now they could see beyond it, to the edge of the galaxy itself where space seemed to ripple and twist like disturbed water. Admiral Chen's voice filled the chamber, broadcast from the bridge of the new Terra. Coalition Command, this is Admiral Chen. I'm transmitting sensor data from our deep space monitoring stations. What you're about to see is the reason we've revealed ourselves. The image shifted, zooming in on the spatial distortions. As they watched, something emerged from the twisted space, something vast and organic, pulsing with malevolent energy. It was followed by another, then another, until dozens of the impossible creatures were visible against the starfield. The Devourers, Chen's voice was grim. We've been fighting them for 300 years, holding them back at the galaxy's edge. But our defenses are failing. They're coming, and when they arrive, they won't distinguish between human and coalition. They consume everything, matter, energy, even the fabric of space itself. Admiral Krixta stared at the display in horror. How long do we have? 6 months, Zara said quietly. Maybe less. That's why we need the coalition's help. Your industrial capacity combined with our technology might be enough to stop them. Emphasis on might. The war room fell silent as the implication sank in. General Thondar was the first to speak. And if we refuse? Then we all die, Zara replied simply. Humans, Vorthak, crystalline, reptilian, it won't matter. The Devourers don't negotiate, they don't take prisoners, and they don't leave survivors. Fleet Commander Zethic's environmental suit hissed as he leaned back in his chair. What would this cooperation entail? Full technology sharing, Admiral Chen's voice answered. Combined fleet exercises. joint research and development programs, and most importantly, a unified command structure for the coming war. Unified under human command, no doubt, Admiral Kriksta said bitterly. Actually, no. The admission seemed to surprise everyone, including Zara. We're proposing a joint command structure with representatives from every major coalition species. We know we can't win this war alone. That's why we need you. Ambassador Kethtar stepped forward, his diplomatic training finally overcoming his shock. This is a lot to process. The coalition leadership will need time to consider. An alarm suddenly shrieked through the war room. The tactical displays shifted again, showing coalition fleet positions throughout the galaxy. Red warning indicators were flashing at dozens of locations. What's happening? General Thondar demanded. A technician's voice crackled over the intercom, high with panic. Sirs, we're receiving reports from the outer colonies. Multiple systems are reporting spatial anomalies, gravitational distortions. Some of the monitoring stations have gone dark. On the display, the image of the Devourers pulsed with increasing intensity. They were moving faster now, their impossible forms cutting through space like living ships. 6 months was optimistic. Admiral Chen's voice was tight with strain. They're accelerating. We have weeks, maybe days. Zara looked around the room at the faces of beings who had thought themselves the masters of the galaxy. Gentlemen, ladies, distinguished beings. The choice is simple. We can face the Devourers together, as allies united in defense of our homes and our children, or we can face them separately and watch as everything we've built turns to ash. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. But either way, the age of innocence is over. The galaxy just became a much more dangerous place, and we're all going to have to decide what we're willing to sacrifice to survive. As if summoned by her words, the lights in the war room dimmed, and through the reinforced viewports they could see the human fleet taking up defensive positions around Zentaris Prime. 12,000 ships, their hulls gleaming with unknown technologies, preparing for a war that would determine the fate of every living being in the galaxy. The mythology had become reality. And reality, it seemed, was far more terrifying than any fairy tale ever told. Epilogue. New alliances. 1 week later, the Grand Assembly Chamber had been transformed. The circular seating arrangement remained, but new sections had been added. Sleek, human-designed pods that looked almost organic compared to the Coalition's crystalline architecture. The beings occupying these new seats were unmistakably human, but different from Dr. Zara Okafor in subtle ways. Some were taller, others had skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light, and a few showed adaptations that spoke of centuries spent in the depths of space. Ambassador Kethtar stood at the central podium, looking out at an assembly that now represented not just 1,000 worlds but 2 distinct evolutionary paths of intelligence. In the past week, everything had changed. The Terran Integration Accords, he announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber, have been ratified by a majority vote of 734 to 266. Humanity is officially recognized as a member, species of the Galactic Coalition. A mixture of applause and nervous chittering filled the air. Not everyone was happy with the decision, but the reports from the Outer Rim had made the choice unavoidable. The Devourers were real, they were coming, and the galaxy needed every advantage it could get. Admiral Sarah Chen rose from her seat in the human section. She was smaller than many had expected, barely 5.5 feet tall, with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that spoke of decades spent in command of dangerous missions. But when she spoke, every being in the chamber listened. Honored delegates, my people, thank you for this opportunity. We know that trust must be earned, not given, and we're prepared to prove ourselves worthy of your faith. Senator Quarix's mandibles clicked skeptically. Fine words, Admiral, but actions speak louder. What concrete steps are you taking to address the Devourer threat? Chen smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression. I'm glad you asked, Senator. She gestured, and the chamber's holographic displays came alive with technical schematics and star charts. Project Prometheus is already underway. Human shipyards are being retrofitted to produce coalition-compatible vessels, while coalition facilities are being upgraded with human defensive technologies. We estimate we can triple our combined fleet strength within 4 months. General, Thondar leaned forward with interest. Triple? How is that possible? Automated construction, Dr. Zara Okafor answered, standing from her new position as human cultural liaison. One of the adaptations we developed during our exile was the ability to rapidly reproduce essential technologies. Every human ship carries fabrication systems that can construct other ships given sufficient raw materials. Like a virus, muttered Commander Zethic, though whether he meant it as an insult or a compliment was unclear. Like life, Chen corrected firmly. Which is what we're all fighting to preserve. Chancellor Vexen's crystalline form pulsed with cautious optimism. What about the joint research programs? Our scientists are eager to begin collaborative work. Admiral Chen's expression grew more serious. That's where things get complicated. Some of our technologies come with risks. We'll need to establish strict protocols, perhaps even quarantine facilities for the more dangerous research. Dangerous how? Admiral Crixta demanded. Let me show you something, Chen said quietly. The displays shifted to show a star system none of them recognized. 4 planets orbiting a yellow sun, with signs of massive industrial development on the second and third worlds. This was the Kepler 442 system, site of one of our first major defeats against the Devourers. We tried to stop them using conventional weapons, even some of our most advanced energy technologies. Nothing worked. The image zoomed in on the third planet, showing cities that stretched across entire continents. Then, suddenly, everything changed. The cities began to dissolve, the very matter of the planet seeming to flow away into space like water. So we used something unconventional, Chen continued, her voice flat and emotionless. A weapon that unravels the quantum bonds holding matter together. It stopped the Devourers, but the planet imploded, collapsing in on itself until nothing remained but a sphere of exotic matter barely a mile across. We killed 1 billion of our own people to save the rest of the galaxy, Chen said into the stunned silence. That's the kind of war we're fighting. That's the kind of enemy we're facing. Ambassador Kethtar felt his blood run cold. You're saying these weapons could destroy entire worlds? We're saying they have destroyed entire worlds, Admiral Chen replied. Ours and theirs. The question now is whether you trust us enough to help us build more, because without them the Devourers will consume everything. The chamber erupted in debate, voices rising in fear and outrage. But beneath the chaos, a new understanding was taking shape. The humans hadn't been hiding in the Terran Nebula out of cowardice or malice. They had been fighting a war that no one else even knew existed. Dr. Zara Okafor stood and raised her hand for silence. When the chamber quieted, she spoke with the weight of someone who had carried secrets for far too long. We didn't want this burden, she said simply. We didn't choose to be the galaxy's guardians. But when the Devourers first appeared, when they began consuming the outer spiral arms, someone had to stand against them. Someone had to hold the line. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings from 100 different worlds. We've been alone for 3 centuries, fighting and dying in the dark so that you could live in the light. Now that light is fading, and we need your help to rekindle it. Chancellor Vexen's form flickered with what might have been shame. Why didn't you contact us sooner? Why hide yourselves for so long? Because we were afraid, Admiral Chen admitted. Afraid you'd reject us, afraid you'd try to control us, afraid you'd want to use our weapons for your own wars instead of the war that matters. And now? General Thondar asked. Chen looked toward the chamber's great viewports, where the combined human coalition fleet was taking formation for joint exercises. 12,000 human ships and 8,000 coalition vessels, moving together in patterns that had been impossible just weeks before. Now we're all afraid, she said. But we're afraid together, and that distinguished beings might just be enough. As the session concluded and delegates began filing out to their respective ships and quarters, Ambassador Kethtar found himself standing beside Dr. Zara Okafor at one of the great viewports. Outside, the fleet stretched to the horizon, a testament to what could be accomplished when species work together instead of against each other. "Do you really think we can win?" he asked quietly. Zara was silent for a long moment, watching a group of human and Vorthak technicians working together on a new hybrid destroyer design. "I think we can try," she said finally. "And sometimes, trying is enough." In the distance, space itself seemed to ripple, as if something vast and hungry was testing the boundaries of reality. The Devourers were coming, but for the first time in 3 centuries, humanity would not face them alone. The galaxy had awakened to a new reality, one where fairy tales were real, myths could kill, and survival depended on species that had once been enemies learning to trust each other with their very existence. The war for the galaxy's soul was about to begin, and in the depths of space, where legend met reality and hope battled despair, the future of all life hung in the balance. End of They thought humans were myths until their armada appeared.